Most people never venture beyond the outskirts of San Juan, but there is so much more to explore on the other side of the island, just a short 2-hour drive away. You'll never be bored with waterfalls to swim in, caves to explore, surfers to watch, and food that is out of this world. But there are a few things that you need to know before you go. Let's go! Tip number 1. Did you know that there are actually 2 international airports on Puerto Rico? Of course, there is the main airport in San Juan, but there is also a smaller and much easier to navigate airport over here on the west side in Aguadilla. And they do have multiple flights that come in from all over the world throughout the day. However, most of the flights that come in and out of Aguadilla are what they call zombie flights, meaning they leave in the middle of the night and arrive in the middle of the night. And I'm talking like 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So that is something to keep in mind. It will save you a lot of time and frustration if you fly into Aguadilla instead of San Juan if you want to explore the west side of Puerto Rico. And if you're flying out on a 3 a.m. flight, it means that you get to have another day in paradise without having to pay the price of another night's stay. Tip number 2 when coming to the west side of Puerto Rico is that you are absolutely going to need a car in order to explore all of those fun things like the waterfalls and caves. Both airports have plenty of companies to choose from, but one tip here is to go ahead and make that reservation for your rental car early in advance, but don't pay for it yet. Now, when it gets to be a couple of weeks out from your trip, go back and look at those rates. I have found, and my friends have found, that often the rates will have dropped from the original time that they booked their rental car, and you can cancel that first reservation and reserve another car at a much lower rate. So use that tip when you come here. The other thing to know about the rental cars here in Puerto Rico is that there are toll roads when you are driving around Puerto Rico. Not a lot, but there are a few. So all of the rental cars are going to come with a toll reader. Now, the tolls here are not that expensive. I mean, I think they're like 90 cents or $1 each time you go through the tolls, but the rental car companies are going to charge you an upcharge for each of those tolls. And they don't really give you an option whether you get a toll reader or not. The other issue with the toll fees is that they usually don't get sent to you until later after you've gotten home from your trip. So you could be getting charges a few weeks up to a few months after you get home from your trip. But like I said, there aren't a whole lot of tolls, so those service fees are probably not going to end up being that much. You're looking at maybe $20 to $30 total. Tip number 3 for driving around Puerto Rico is that you need to know, although it is a U.S. territory, everything is mostly in the metric system. So the distances are going to be in kilometers. You're going to be refueling your vehicle with liters of gas instead of gallons of gas. However, the speed limit signs are actually in miles per hour, not kilometers per hour. So it does get to be a little bit confusing. And sticking with driving in Puerto Rico tips, you don't want to rely on Google or Apple Maps to get around all of the time. I would say they're about 60 to 75% correct, but that other 25% of the time, it could take you way off in a wrong direction, or at least take you down a road that either doesn't exist or is closed for construction. So if you are heading up into the mountains especially, this is where it gets a little more of an issue, is when you're going into the mountains to do excursions to waterfalls and caves. You're going to want to follow the instructions that are given to you by your tour guides. The roads are very, very windy and curvy and narrow, and you're going to want to know where you are going for sure. Unfortunately, Google and Apple Maps could just take you off in some random direction. And with cell service being a little iffy in those areas, you might not be able to get service to be able to redirect you on the Google Maps. The other thing about driving those windy and curvy and very narrow roads is don't be afraid to use your horn when you are traveling here. You are going to want to use that beep, beep, beep to let other cars know that you are coming around the curve. And of course, keep your ear out for cars beeping when they are coming around the curve towards you. It is quite curvy. And if you have issues with motion sickness, I would highly encourage you to get those little wristbands that help with the pulse points. I used those this time and it helped tremendously. It was nice not to have to take Dramamine for once for driving around. Tip number 5, if you are flying here from somewhere other than the United States, you are going to want to get cash at the airports. There are very few places to change currency throughout the island other than at the airports, and you are going to want to have cash with you. So if you are flying from Europe or from Latin America, go ahead and change your money at the airport so that you have the cash on hand and you're not trying to look for a bank or somewhere else to change money. It is not like other places where there's money changers all over the place. You definitely need to get it done at the airport or get it done before you come to the country. And speaking of cash, tip number 6, you absolutely need to bring cash with you. Many places here don't take cards because of the extra fees that the credit cards charge. And a lot of them don't use Venmo, PayPal, or Apple Pay either. They have their own app that they use here in Puerto Rico for paying. So they don't tend to use those apps that are common for us to use. So you want to have that cash, especially if you plan on shopping at small local boutiques or getting some of that delicious food at the food carts or food vendors that you see along the roadside. Now let's get into the fun stuff. If you are adventurous like I am, there are 3 activities that I think that you should absolutely do when you come to the west side of Puerto Rico. The first is Gazlandia Waterfalls, or Cascada Gazlandia, which totally embodies the nickname of Puerto Rico, which is the Enchanted Island. I've been twice, and both times it's truly been one of the highlights of the trip. There are 2 waterfalls with paved walkways, and it's not a hard hike at all. So if you're wearing flip-flops or sandals, you will be just fine. In fact, I wore flip-flops both times that I went. You can swim in the pools, you can jump off the rocks, and you can even explore little caves that are to the side. However, remember that you are doing this all at your own risk. So make smart choices. And just a heads up, if you've gotten used to swimming in the warm Caribbean ocean water, the water of those pools is going to be quite shocking because it is pretty cold. It's a fantastic place to go when it's really hot outside because it will definitely cool you off. It does cost $10 per car as an entrance fee, but that is a steal, I think, for the entertainment that you get for the day. You do want to make sure if you are going to use your GPS navigation to get there, that you do not put in the Gazlandia Waterfall Campground as the location, because that is a completely different area and it will take you a completely different wrong way to get to the waterfalls. A bonus is at the top of the entrance, there is a bar restaurant, but you can treat yourself to a pina colada or a taco after you're done swimming. The second activity is probably one of the most fun tours I have ever gone on, and that is the Mucara Cave tour that we did with the Tanama River Adventures. Oh my gosh, I can't say enough about how exciting and exhilarating this adventure was. They took us on tours of caverns, we hiked down and up a waterfall, and we went deep, deep into a cave where you couldn't even see your hand in front of your face when you turned all the lights out. They even have an option that you can rappel down into the canyon if you want to, and I think that is something I'm going to do next time that I come. You're going to hike through the river multiple times. You see tons of wildlife. The tour company only does 1 tour a day, and they limit the number of people that they bring on the tour to only 12. And because this area isn't very accessible to people outside that, know about the hike, it's not easy to get to, and there isn't a whole lot of areas to be able to park to actually do the trail. So you're pretty much in there with just that group of 12 people. It's so refreshing to be able to do an adventure like this without all of the crowds. And I'm comparing it to the Narrows at Zion, which was insanely crowded. This was so much more fun and nicer in my personal opinion. Highly, highly recommend. Absolutely something that I'm going to do when I come back again. And lastly is the Quo del Indio in Arecibo. It is famous for the dozens of petroglyphs that were carved by the Taino, which are the original occupants of Puerto Rico before the Spanish arrived. But the main attraction that most people come for are the 7 arches that have been formed by the sea into the rocks. Just gorgeous, gorgeous views as you climb up the rocks and look out over the ocean. An added bonus are the pretty little tide pools along the beach areas where, if you have time, you can take a dip to cool off on a hot day, but only if the ocean isn't too rough. The day that we arrived, as we were walking in the entrance, there was a woman coming out that had been got a little too close to the tide pools, and a sneaker wave got her and knocked her down on the rocks, and she was all scraped up. So you definitely want to listen to what the tour guide tells you, or the person who at the entranceway tells you about the weather, and use precaution. Again, make smart choices because you're doing all of these things at your own risk. Now, if it's a calm day, you can sit in those tide pools and enjoy the water and just have an absolute ball. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous location. It does cost $5 per person to get in, and I would recommend wearing closed-toed shoes, or at the minimum like a Tiva type pair of shoes. I wore flip-flops this day, and I really wish I'd had a little more sturdy shoes on because the rocks can be a bit sharp, but it is very, very fun and oh so picturesque. So if you're an Instagrammer, you're gonna love this place. Tip number 8, make sure to sample as much local Puerto Rican cuisine as you can. The food here is so delicious. And if you are a seafood lover, it is plentiful. I mean, you are on the ocean after all, but make sure you are choosing fish that actually come from this area. Save the salmon and halibut for when you go to Alaska, because that's where those fish are from. When you're here, try the shrimp, the grouper, the mahi, or the tuna. Those are all local, and you are going to find some delicious dishes made from those. Now, I have 2 things that I would suggest that you try while you're here that are local dishes. The first is called Churrasco, and that is a skirt flank steak that they marinate in a chimichurri sauce, and it is so good. And I'm not even a steak eater, and I love this stuff. The second is Mofongo, which is a Puerto Rican dish that they make from green plantains. That they fry the green plantain, and then they mash it up, and they mix it with chicharrones, which are fried pork skin. And then each place kind of does it a little different. They'll put like a shrimp gravy on it or another gravy, but it's basically a side dish that you can get with any protein that you want to get. And it's so good. In fact, I would suggest trying it at a couple of different places because it's kind of different every restaurant that I've gotten it at. Do not be afraid to try the food on the side of the road. Those food carts and food vendors, they have some amazing, amazing food. And you might, like I did, get the best shrimp empanada of your life. Oh, it was, I know I've been doing a lot of chef's kiss because the food here, I'm going to miss the food here so much. It's so good and so fresh. If you are a sweets eater like I am, you are definitely going to want to try the flan and the tres leche. I think I've had 5 types of flan since I've been here, so don't miss out on the desserts. Tip number 9, bring an inexpensive set of snorkel gear with you. There are so many little protected bays and coves that you could just wade into like waist or shoulder deep water and see tons of colorful fish swimming around without ever having to spend a dime. Be aware though that the currents can get strong in this area, so you want to keep an eye on that and make sure you don't get swept out to sea. Be sure also not to step or touch on the rocks or the reef so that we can protect those little sea life animals that are living there. And always make sure that you are wearing reef safe sunscreen. If you are interested in other tropical places to visit, check out one of these videos next.